The ants in this colony are hungry, gathering and running around. Everyone is making pace to check out the arena. Will there be food? I've been skipping their meal yesterday, because today they will receive something bigger. And I'm hoping that their appetite is even bigger than it normally is. Not a big fan of gruesome content? Then maybe this video is not for you. And that's okay, because the next video will be a lot less gruesome. Still here? Amazing! I gave the ant colony a baby mouse, a so-called pinky. Don't worry, I buy these from the freezer, and no animals were hurt in the making of this video. The content may be a little bit graphic, because I am filming the mouse every day. In this way you will have a proper view of their daily progression until it's nothing but bones. The ants are called Polyrhachis divas, also known as golden weaver ants, and their setup is an absolute eye-catcher. It's a 50 by 50 centimeters acrylic outworld, and it's one of the most fascinating colonies in the antroom. Like I mentioned, they have a beautiful golden glow, spikes on their back and extraordinary behavior. They have the capability of making their own nest, and they have two of them, two big ones. Beautiful but bizarre structures made by their larvae used as a glue gun. I have several in-depth videos about this colony. If you feel interested, make sure to check them out. For now, it's time to feed. On today's menu, a pinky baby mouse. But why a pinky mouse, you may ask? The ants have an insane appetite, and if I'm feeding them insects, they rush through their meal and get bored afterwards. That's why these ants get some additional food sources. I make sure to add sugar cubes so they have always got something to work on. And besides the feeder insects, the ants will also receive a mouse, because they simply take longer to consume. But how long does it take for them to consume it? Well, it's part of my routine, and they eat 1 to 2 mice per week. So I'm able to guess, but I'm not entirely sure how long it will take them. What do you think? How many days will it take for the ants to consume the mouse until it's nothing but bones? Let me know in the comments, without peeking of course. And here it is, the pinky mouse. It may seem harsh, but to my understanding these are being sold as a food source due to overpopulation. As you can see, compared with my finger, it's not that big. But I'm sure it's one big chunk of protein for the ants. Only a brief moment goes by and the mouse is discovered and juices are being consumed. I made a time lapse of the first 30 minutes. Usually ants leave a pheromone trail to let the others know that there is food. But in this colony that's not the case. You can see that the number of ants are going up at a steady pace and remain the same when the mouse reaches its max capacity. No ants are rushing or flooding each other. The deconstruction of the mouse is going somewhat organized and controlled. It takes the colony only 70 minutes to get one of the feet off. But besides the missing food, there's not much damage done. I decide to come back at night for some progression shots, and from there I will be filming them every night. And while my wife and my kids are safe asleep in bed, this is what I found in the antroom at night. Still going, and like I mentioned, I control the amount of ants on the meal. And while this may seem not too bad from a distance, it gets a little bit worse when we zoom in. Yuck! Ants are starting to breach at the back, slowly taking small bits away. And as you can see, they have made quite an open batch on the rear. They're not being very subtle, and using a lot of motion and strength to get the small pieces off. The ants at the bottom doing their very best to get that paw off, and the ant in the middle is using a lot of motion and strength, wiggling her head from the left to the right. I suppose that the tissue beneath the skin is a lot softer and easier to work with. That's why the ants are starting to breach on several other locations as well. But the most disturbing one must be the face. Of course, getting in through the ears, eyes, nose or mouth is a lot easier than going through the skin. It's a little bit roughened up, but it still doesn't look too bad. And it seems they are progressing faster from the back. I think the ants did an amazing job in the first few hours. I decided to let the ants be and check again in 24 hours. And when I get back in the next evening, wow, bones, and a lot of it. The ants have been working around the clock, and it shows. While yesterday the mouse was still intact, with just a few patches, today they're going towards the bones in a very fast pace. You can clearly see the shape of the skull, and also the ribs are coming through. I can imagine that the mouse will dry out eventually, so the ants will need to be fast. Some of the angles are pretty disturbing, and I can imagine that these kind of shots are not suitable for everyone. There's a hole at the spot where the eyes used to be, and you can see right through. The remains so far remind me of chicken wings that have not been eaten all the way. It looks like there's not a lot of flesh left, but when we skip to the third day, you can see that the ants still have plenty of meat to work with. Gross! Even more bones this time. Just when I thought things would slow down, the ants show that they are very determined. The skull only has some small patches of meat left. You can clearly see the ribs and spine, and everything in between is slowly drying out. The ants are still working very hard, getting the last scraps of their feast. After all, this colony is big, and they can use everything they can get their hands on. But like I mentioned before, the ants can get bored, or have the feeling that their food supply is not enough. Ants can decide to cut down in population, which means they're eating the brood or killing the slower and weaker workers. I've had this happen a couple of times, and I can tell you they cut down in population in big numbers. I don't want this to happen. The ants have done their best and demolished the mouse in 3 days. The bones are clearly showing. There's an entire skull, and the ants are already hyped up for their next meal. That's why I decided to leave the corpse be for now, and add another meal in the form of a dubia roach. And while I play the time-lapse, I would love to tell you some amazing details of my Polyrhachis divus colony, and why I think they're superior to a lot of my colonies in the antroom. The colony is very adaptive. Lower temperatures means more ants in the nest, and when it comes to being adaptive, like I mentioned, it's pretty common to see the ants killing other fellow sisters. I think they do this to optimize their colony. Slower and weaker workers will only take up resources. And it may seem harsh, but it's an amazing strategy to stay alive. The ants are tidy and are always placing debris and corpses as far away from the nest as they can. Another fascinating detail is that I've never discovered any mites with the colony. And that might sound obvious, but I've had 2 major mite infestations. It's all good now, but the Polyrhachis divus always remains clean and mite free. I would like to show you one last thing. This is their main nest. In the beginning of the recordings, I made some quick shots, and I would like you to focus on this area. This is how they typically build in my setup. They build upwards against the wall, and 3 days later, this is what it looks like. The ants completely took the top off and folded it over the rest of the nest. They keep on repeating this process and build their nest layer by layer. I thought it would be nice to show. I have had my geek moment, and I finally have my before and after footage. What do you guys think of the colony? Amazing, aren't they? I would like to apologize for the delay. I have an amazing new job, which is pretty exhausting as it is new. But subscribing, commenting and liking would motivate me a lot to keep out pushing content. And for the next video, I will be attaching the biggest nest I have in the antroom. I hope you are as excited and curious as I am. For now, I would like to thank you all for watching, and I'm hoping to see you all in the next video. Bye bye! The skull only shows small The skull only small. Jezus. The skull only